Duncan can't die. What a shitty organization.
People can be pedophiles. People can be pedophiles without ever being attracted to a specific human child. People can be pedophiles without ever being attracted to a specific human child.
What?
You'd think anyone with a frankly generous following of over 96,000 subscribers would have the common sense to be responsible in what kind of rhetoric they impart to their audience. But sadly, we have those like Duncan Can't Die who lack said common sense. Specifically speaking, his deleterious takes on Lolicon. But before we get to that whole mess, I'll first explain what Lolicon is for those who are unfamiliar with the term. The word loli describes a petite anime girl with childlike features. The belief that lolis are strictly underage characters is a common misconception, but actually they can be any age. Lolis can be flat-chested or busty, they can have a tube-like body or be curvy. Any female anime character can be classified as a loli as long as they're small, has a childlike face, and as long as the art depicting them has the loli style, which although is typically judged on a case-by-case basis, usually adheres to the features shown here: rounder face, full cheeks, large eyes, a small frame, etc. The word lolicon can mean two things. First, referring to an individual who is sexually attracted to lolis. Second, referring to loli content as a genre. It should be noted that not all loli content is explicit. Sometimes it can simply be cute and wholesome with absolutely no sexual undertones. Now that we understand what loli and lolicon is, let's dive into why the information Duncan is spreading about it is beyond flawed.
We're not going to stoop to Duncan's level and accuse him of being a predator without any sort of proof. But given the amount of times people with his mentality have been outed as creeps, groomers, and whatnot, well, let's just say if he was to one day fall under this stereotype, we wouldn't be surprised. All we're doing is showcasing what disreputable things he said so that you, the viewer, can draw your own conclusion based off of what we've shown you. Our main goal with this video is to simply correct misinformation. Also, with the evidence that we're about to present, we only ask of one thing. Whatever you do, do not attack this person. Don't do it. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's begin.
No matter how you look at it, Japan has way lower abuse rates than almost any country.
No. That's not true. It's just not true. It has some of the worst in the first world, if not the worst in the first world.
According to the World Health Organization, Japan actually has one of the lowest rates for sexual violence against women. In fact, this rate is almost comparable to how it is in the United Kingdom, where Duncan lives.
It's like, yeah, but because those kinds of people exist and because it is being sold, there is also the possibility that these people won't be able to keep it in their imaginations and will actually go out and produce child pornography or commit sexual acts to young underage girls in Japan. Do you realize how fucking stupid and old you sound right now? That is the exact same argument as saying people who play too much Grand Theft Auto have the possibility to go out and hijack a real car and kill a bunch of police officers. People who watched too much Rambo as a child have the possibility of going out and shooting up a whole bunch of people in public. Okay, while that may possibly be true, and I can't speak on behalf of all of these quote-unquote potential pedophiles, blaming doujins for promoting that kind of stuff is a bit ass backwards. What you should be doing instead of criticizing and trying to ban these kinds of fictional depictions of girls is going after people who buy these kinds of things, or better yet, going after people who actually do go and commit sexual crimes. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh Joey, that's fucking ridiculous. If there's a problem with child pornography in Japan, then obviously these kinds of doujins aren't fucking helping. Oh yeah, these kinds of things definitely aren't helping, especially considering the fact that the crime rate in Japan and the rape and sexual crime rates in Japan are some of the lowest in the entire world. The interview ended with a very hotly contested exchange. Before leaving, Dooley asked Nogami, why don't you Japanese people follow what the UK does? Maybe because Japan is not the UK. Welcome to a different country, motherfucker. Nogami's reply to this statement, by the way, is just fucking gold. Nogami replied, "Why don't you British people follow Japan since we're more civilized and have a lower crime rate than the UK?" Fucking roasted! Roasted! For reference, Japan has a crime rate of 12.8 compared to the UK's rate of 48. In the end, Nogami said he regretted that their opinions were inconsolable and felt that Dooley was going to misrepresent his words to distract the UK from their own sex crime issues. For reference, the UK has a rape rate of 14.2, 13th highest in the world, while Japan has a rate of 1.7, 54th highest in the world. Do some fucking research next time. Just because you have a particular social justice warrior look on anime and manga and these depiction of fictional girls, it doesn't mean that it should be enforced on an entire culture. And I'm not saying, don't express your opinions if it's different from the norm. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying be a little bit more open to this kind of things, and also do your fucking research. With this case and the whole UN case last year, I'm so fucking sick of these people outside of Japan and outside of these kinds of communities in the traditional media who criticize anime and manga for potentially leading to these kinds of real acts. If you don't fucking understand it, then leave it alone. Don't talk about it and think that you know what the fuck is going on, when the people inside the community are laughing at what you're saying and claiming right now. It's just fucking embarrassing, dude. Like, I agree, talk about real life pedophilic acts in Japan. We can all get behind that and say that it is fucked up and it deserves to stop. But fiction, anime and manga, is innocent.
There is a weird obsession in Japan with underage girls, and the root cause of it, in my opinion, is Lolicon.
You serious?
Once again, he's incorrect. As it stands, every credible study about lolly content and its real-life influence has stated there is no correlation between that and sexual violence, nor is there any correlation between fictional media causing a desire to act on immoral fantasies. And despite how many people would say otherwise, it is the same thing as video games cause violence. It's just recycled.
This is an example of what's called the post hoc fallacy. It's where you argue that event A happened, then event B happened, therefore event A caused event B. Now, while there are cases where event A did cause event B, you have to demonstrate that one really did cause the other. Which is why when scientists perform studies, they'll usually have multiple test subjects, an experimental group and control group, and they'll account for various factors that could influence the outcome.
So I made a video about a very creepy video I watched. It was sort of a reaction video. Somebody suggested a video on stream. I watched it. I was very creeped out, uploaded my reaction to it. And in that video, I mentioned that Lolicon bad, that the sexualization of childlike traits is bad.
Short and or small frames, flat chest, baby-faced, these are just as much childlike traits as they can be for adult women as well. You can't judge a person's age based on looks alone. Some people look a lot older than they actually are, and the inverse is also true. And in Asia specifically, youth and femininity is strongly emphasized when it comes to beauty standards. Regardless of appearance though, their age is their age. As long as they are above the age of consent, they're free to engage in sexual activity and be sexualized as they wish. Saying that an adult has childlike features isn't helping anyone. It just makes you a body-shaming asshole.
It's pretty unhealthy to be into it, and finding Lolicon attractive is an unhealthy thing. It is an abnormal sexual attraction, right?
People are well within their right to be uncomfortable about the subject of lollies. Hell, there's even a paraphilia about being attracted to cartoon characters, but consuming lolicon isn't any more unhealthy than any other kind of porn.
As far as I'm concerned, especially being from a country where it is illegal and it is considered child porn.
Keep what he says here in the back of your mind. It's gonna be important later.
But lolicon here means pedophile here.
Well, that's not true. And if that were the case, then the entire country is using the word incorrectly. Fantastic. In Japanese, the term for pedophile is actually a loan word, not lolicon.
Let's talk about lolly, and let's talk about why I think lolicon is so messed up.
You can say that lolicon is messed up all you want, but if you're gonna try to prove that it's illegal, you're gonna have to back it up with sources. Which he doesn't fucking do because research is hard.
When it comes to child pornography, there are two problems with child pornography, right? There is the fact an actual child was abused, and there is the fact that somebody is getting sexual gratification from looking at the child pornography. The fact that somebody is getting sexual gratification from that is abnormal, and it is wrong, right? So yes, when you are talking about Lolicon, you remove one aspect of that, which is an actual child getting hurt. And that is great. But what you also do is allow the normalization of the sexualization of children and childlike characteristics.
Duncan, shut your mouth for 1 second and pay attention to what you've just said. By using the term childlike, you're admitting that lollies are indeed adults. Let me say this again. Childlike refers to an adult in physical terms, yet in the same sentence you refer to them as children. Which is it? Which is it? Also, how the hell did we go from drawings on paper to CSEM? That's one hell of a slippery slope, dude. Do you mind backing that up? Oh wait, he can't. Why though? Because lollies aren't children? They're unrealistic cartoon characters? So it would only make sense that explicit lolly content shouldn't be considered or compared to CSEM. But we'll elaborate on that later.
So why do I think it's so gross to find sexual gratification or sexual attraction to childlike characters? Because they look like children? And being attracted to children is gross?
Hey, I hate to break it to you, pal, but this does not look like any child I've ever seen. 2D characters cannot look like any human being, because human beings aren't 2D, but especially anime characters. Look me in the eyes and tell me that this drawing, this thing with a big-ass head, eyebrows up to the fucking moon, no nose, tiny-ass mouth, skin of one-dimensional color, and eyes that are half the size of their head, looks like a child. If anime characters resembled real human beings, they would look like... Oh god. Anyways, how can someone, as you said previously, normalize the sexualization of children if there is no image of a child involved? Are you trying to say that lolis look like children? That any anime character looks like a human being? Reality check. Yeah, I think not.
Finding children sexually attractive is gross? Is this sinking in? Is this working? Like, hello internet, I have an incredibly hot take apparently. Finding children sexually attractive is gross.
I absolutely agree, and so do lolicons. The idea of actual cheese pizza disgusts them, as it would anyone else. Remember that the word loli doesn't refer to age, it refers only to appearance. But even if the character was underage, it wouldn't matter, as it only serves as a label that helps bring the character to life. Again, they're not realistic. Hopefully I don't need to bring that image back to show you why. Duncan, I feel the need to remind you that a drawing can never be a human being. It can depict a human being, but it can never actually be a living, breathing, bleeding human being. Otherwise, I'd have to pay taxes. Drawings can never be anything other than pixels on a screen or lines on paper. What's depicted in a drawing is not tangible and will never be tangible. 99% of people can tell the difference between cartoon characters and real people. The only exceptions are people who suffer from severe mental illnesses that inhibit their ability to distinguish fiction from reality, such as schizophrenia. Even children as young as 3 years old can separate the two. Going back to Lolicon specifically, their desire for lolis are known to be distinct from any realistic depiction. Research has shown that these 2D characters are not compensating for something more real. They're attracted to the cuteness and aesthetic of the image itself. Some critics have defined Lolicon as the desire for cute things as opposed to something real. So yeah, lolis are not children, nor are they seen as children.
But the most popular reasoning as to why anime fans are okay with lollies is because they just don't see them as children, which is probably going to be extremely scary for some of you watching this, because upon first hearing that, you're like, oh god, they're really messed up. No, That's not what I'm saying. You might be thinking to yourself, isn't the literal definition of lollies to have a childlike appearance? And the answer is yes. A childlike appearance, not actually children. The second stream of logic that I've been made aware of is the separation of fiction and reality. The reason why anime fans don't see lollies as children is because they know what children are actually like. Lollies are, in their eyes, too perfect. They know children to be needy, have snot on their face, and are typically a big handful to deal with, because that's how children really are. And when you show them lollies, who are not any of those things, they just can't see them as children due to their real-life experience with real children. They like lollies just because they're cute. What I found to be what I think is the truth is that lollies are just a kink. Just like how furries aren't actually attracted to animals. They like the anthropomorphized hybrids with the cognitive ability equal to an actual human, which is entirely fictional. Anime fans like lollies, who aren't attracted to actual children.
Because you are getting turned on by an image of a child. You understand that, right? What if it was CGI and it was so realistic that it looked real? What if it was the best CGI in the world, deep fake level CGI? Is it still okay because no kid is getting harmed? Are you still good with it? Are you good with just raw dog porn done with deep fake and really good CGI? And that's fine because no actual child's getting hurt?
If it's realistic enough to look indistinguishable from a real child, then it would be actionable. Lollies do not. A sane person looks at an anime character and doesn't compare them to humans. If your first thought is literal child when you see a lolly, you might want to check the skeletons rattling in your closet. I know I sound like a broken record, but it bears repeating until it's firmly placed in everybody's minds. Lollies are not children.
Also, realistic CGI is entirely subjective. What could be the best CGI to you could be the worst to someone else. For example, the character designs in the Polar Express were heavily criticized for dipping into the uncanny valley. One critic even claimed that if they were a child, quote, they'd have nightmares but did anyway, unquote. In my opinion, however, I think the film looks outstanding. I'm not bothered by the character designs, but I do understand why they rubbed people the wrong way. Plus, it's 2004 CGI, I mean, can you really blame them? On the topic of deepfake, I'd say it depends on what was used for reference. If someone took a stock image of a real child and placed it on Kana from Dragon Maid, while she's getting raw dogged by Takedo, that's disgusting, no one should do that, and if they did, they should be arrested. However, if someone were to take Anya from Spy Cross Family and use the same character design as a quote-unquote deepfake for Kana in the same situation, then it wouldn't be a problem because Anya doesn't exist, nor is she based on a real child. Gross? That's purely subjective. Illegal? Not a chance in hell, dude. How do I know about CGI, you ask? Because I've studied figure drawing and animation. And while we did use references of real people for our figure drawings, anyone with an IQ above room temperature would know that using real kids as reference for drawings involving sexual situations is not only weird, but a flat-out crime. Just ask Shadman, he'll tell you.
Your logic doesn't track. It's just this weird, you like it because you're a bit weird, maybe you're not properly, you didn't, finish your sexual development properly, maybe you had social issues, and as a result, you're idolizing the sort of age range of, this is generally for phobophiles, like people who like early high school or like freshman girls, where they like 14 to 15-year-olds who've gone through puberty because they couldn't get laid in high school.
Then please, show us this degree. Otherwise, I'm calling ad hominem.
Why are you choosing this character and not an adult female character with massive tits like, I don't know, Nami from One Piece, Lust from Full Metal Alchemist, any of these fucking characters? Because I guarantee you, there's porn of all of them.
I guess short stacks and dwarves just can't find any love. Sorry. And if some lunatic somehow doesn't think he's body shaming, let's not forget that Duncan has called underdeveloped women pedo bait in the past. Refresher.
Educating a child on sex, the fact that a running theme in Lolicon porn is about damaging them with sex.
you said lacking hips and chest. I lack both of those.
Sucks to suck, but that's not the same thing.
Except you
are 100% still have secondary sexual characteristics. If you have gone through puberty, you have secondary sexual characteristics. These drawings do not. Like, they avoid. Have you ever drawn a lolly with body hair? No, of course you haven't. But I know you have body hair because you've gone through puberty.
I don't have body hair.
You have zero body hair. You've never grown a pube in your life. No, so you shaved.
It did runs in my family. I don't have any. My granddad didn't have any.
So you don't have eyebrows, you know, like no body hair whatsoever. You've got alopecia.
I have to fucking fill in my eyebrows. My bad. My sorry.
So you've got alopecia. Like, you'd think you'd know the word for the disorder that you then have.
Said yes. I literally just said yes the first time you asked it.
I didn't hear you. Stream didn't hear you. I mean, no one heard you, so I'm just saying. Like, it didn't come through on this end.
Yes.
So you are flat-chested, no hips, alopecia, so no body hair whatsoever. You talk with a high register voice. You're pedo bait. That's great. You can go and save a pedophile from ever abusing a child. Perfect. That's great.
Huh.
Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, it's, I would actually consider any guy who went after you for those traits, any guy who went after you because you had a flat chest, because you had no hips, because you had no arse, because you had no body hair, I would find that a little odd as the reason that someone found you attractive. Now, if they found you attractive for different reasons, they met you, they really jazzed with you, they liked you a lot, that's fine, right? But if they find you attractive because you are petite and hairless and flat and hipless, right? Then they like you because you look like a child.
If you equate narrow hips, flat chest, and little body hair to a child, that says a lot more about you than it does the people you're debating. It almost makes you wonder if he has any skeletons in his closet. But no, I'm just debating here.
People on the internet like to throw around the word pedophilia like it's a fucking football. And I think ultimately it is hurting people more than it is helping people. Because equipping children with knowledge and power to advocate for themselves and protect themselves is a good thing, and we should continue doing that. What is not a good thing is when pedophilia became a buzzword and we started just throwing it around in order to, A, seem enlightened on the internet, or B, to just cause a fuss for the sake of causing a fuss, to cause discourse for the sake of causing discourse, and C, just using it as an insult to people you don't like. I've said this before, actually. People will throw around the word pedophilia like a fucking football, and will refuse to acknowledge how that negatively affects actual pedophilia cases, how that negatively affects, the social strides we've made as a whole. I mean, first and foremost, you're turning the word pedophilia and pedophile into buzzwords, which you know how buzzwords work on the internet, right? They get used to the point where they, mean nothing anymore. You render these words useless, and then people that actually needed those words cannot use them anymore because you have used and abused these words to the point there's no way to use these abused buzzwords anymore. Protecting children can be used and thrown around to justify moral panic. This has manifested in a very strict set of rules that people are following, and forcing authoritarian style onto other people even though they do not help the situation. This has manifested in people accusing adults engaging with other adults as being pedophiles because of, child coding. This has manifested into gatekeeping what adults can and cannot enjoy in terms of hobby, clothing, even just the way some adults act, and it has overall been blown out of proportion. To the point where it's not helping children anymore. It's certainly not helping adults. And it's rather becoming authoritarian social policing. They'll say that certain features are child-coded and certain features are adult-coded, which I have a huge problem with for lots of different reasons. Here's the thing. When you do that stuff, you are not only infantilizing adults that don't have the adult-coded features, you are maturing children that do have those adult-coded features. You are doing the same thing pedophiles do to justify sleeping with a 16-year-old, but in reverse. Oh, she looks like an adult, and therefore it's not pedophilia for me to sleep with her. No, it is. You're a fucking weirdo. Now, what I mean by it devolves into racism is the other day I saw a TikTok screenshot, and the TikTok itself said, "Why do men enjoy fetishizing Asian women so much?" And the comment of the day said, "Because they look and act like children." How do you not see how fucking racist that is? You are affirming the same logic certain feminists use to shit on other women. A lot of this does feel like the same concept as real women are curvy. God, I fucking hate that shit. No, real women are women. Who would have fucking guessed it?
Why do you choose the child characters? Or the characters that look like children?
Oh my god. Alright, I just need to let this out.
Fuck! God damn it! It's the same old fucking shit! God damn! Oh my gosh, that's 3 fucking guys!
I need to breathe. I need to breathe, alright? Give me a second. Wow.
When you ask the question like that, when people are like, it's just cartoons, so why don't you look at cartoons of adults?
Kind of weird that you care so much about what turns other people on, but I'll humor you. Firstly, a lot of loli characters are adults. Secondly, are you insinuating that women only have porn star type bodies? Because if you've ever seen a woman face to face ever in your life ever, spoiler alert, they don't. Have you never heard of, I don't know, having a preference? A preference of art style, a preference of body type, preference of facial features. There's nothing wrong with any of those, because those preferences can be, and most often are, kept separate from the attraction to underage human beings. Having these preferences causes harm to absolutely no one. Now that I think about it, why are you so obsessed with the age of a character in the first place? Care to explain that?
Is this real life? Are you really seriously sitting there and telling me that this is normal? That this isn't weird? That this isn't some sort of gateway drug?
Experts that advocate against child exploitation have referred to this type of anime and manga as a gateway to the abuse of actual children. Experts also say that explicit anime and manga can be used by pedophiles as tools to groom children. Please answer me this one question, Senator Griff. Who in the holy hell are these so-called experts you speak of? I'm looking through the papers, Senator, and it seems like you have not cited your sources whatsoever. You know that's an automatic 0 in your English exam, right? Like you're just throwing the word experts around to validate your one-sided logic when anybody with a brain that has read even a single page of manga or has watched even a second of any anime will tell you just how wrong that statement is. Because if that were the case and the so-called experts you hired are just straight up spitting facts out of their bullshit mouths, then Tokyo would just be nothing but a bunch of roaming around. And the last time I went to Tokyo, I'm pretty sure there was nothing of the sort, you racist close-minded. Have you ever considered, Senator, that just because you find the material offensive,
it doesn't mean it's actually offensive. Just let people enjoy these mediums in the safety of their own home. Absolutely no children are getting harmed as a direct result of these types of lewd and crude anime and manga, in the same reason that there isn't a bunch of people stealing cars and shooting people up in daylight because some kid played GTA over summer vacation. If anything, experts, and I'm talking about actual experts and years of accumulated data, have shown that the reason why the crime rates in Japan, especially
adult stuff,
crime rates in Japan and
adult stuff,
rates against children in Japan are some of the lowest in the world, is because we have mediums like anime and manga and the entirety of the hentai industry to basically put a stop to people who might have those urges before they go and actually do it to real people and suffer the real world consequences. Listen to these words, okay? Anime is fiction. It is not real, therefore it does not relate to any real life consequences. It is an art form, and taking that away is taking away freedom of expression. If you don't like it, don't fucking look at it.
Japan adopted Lolita and Lolita Complex from the same place. Fashion took Lolita based on the time period that a book was written about. Right? So there was a book, went viral in Japan, super popular for some reason. I think there was a comic as well, called The Lolita Complex. And it is about a dude who fucks a kid. That's the basics of it. Don't read it. It's a fucking weird book. That piece of literature probably should never have been written, especially with what it's resulted in.
The Lolita Complex, published in 1966, written by Russell Trainer, is a book that explores pedophilia by using actual case histories, police records, interviews, and the like. The book I believe he's actually trying to reference is the novel titled simply Lolita, published 1955, written by Vladimir Nabokov. If you had actually bothered to do even an infinitesimal amount of research, Duncan, you'd know that the novel was written about a real-life CSA victim's experience in a pedophilic, abusive relationship.
So Lolicon is a term, it's just an abbreviation of Lolita Complex, so a Japanese sort of neologism. That is misleading, though. So it is very difficult to start discussion about this, because when you hear Lolita Complex, immediately what comes to mind is the novel, and then of course the films and the cultural phenomenon that's so familiar to us in North America and Europe and other parts of the world. So I think we have in our mind that that's what Lolita Complex means, that image of the older man who's lusting after a young girl. And in the case of the novel and film, it's pretty explicit that this is a sexual desire, and it ends up sort of with abuse, a horrific kind of relationship of abuse. And so I think that's in the back of a lot of people's minds when they hear the term Lolita Complex, and in fact has sort of become a buzzword in global discussions of child abuse materials, whether it be film or photography or novels or fiction or cartoons even. And so Lolita Complex has become one of those buzzwords, especially associated, oddly enough, with Japan, because Japan didn't write that novel or produce those films, but there's a phenomenon of sort of young, cute characters, female characters in comics and cartoons, which get picked up in this. And so you sort of have Japan standing in for Lolita Complex in the global imagination of child abuse. And I think when you start at that point, when you start with the term with that particular understanding, you miss a lot of what is going on historically and locally in Japan, which has a little bit more to do with what the term came to mean in local context and less what it means for critics in North America, Europe, and other parts of the world. So it's a borrowed term, sort of took specific meanings within particular subcultures of Japan. And the most obvious example of this would be Lolita fashion. It does not mean older men lusting after younger girls. It's kind of a relationship of objectification. It has to do with my use of fashion to express myself. And it has to do with a lot of sort of rococo and shoujo manga and all kinds of other sorts of images that are taken and sort of put together into this particular image that's part of their subcultural identity. So even though the term is the same, it means something completely different to that subculture. That's just one example of how Lolita has a different meaning. In my own research, I've come to sort of focus on manga anime fans. And manga anime fans had a very distinct meaning of Lolicon. For them, in the 1970s and the 1980s, It was more associated with their desire for fictional characters, specifically bishoujo, or cute girl characters. So there was kind of, in some ways, men and girls, but very distinctly, it was men and women as well, but it was manga anime fans talking about their desire, their affection for manga anime characters. So Lolicon, in that sense, had a specific meaning, which does not mean the same thing as it would in other parts of the world. So when you see someone who says, as sometimes people do, I'm a Lolicon in Japan, they might say this quite openly. This is not a confession of potential predatory desire or pedophilia. What they mean, most often, is I have affection for this particular kind of character, a manga anime character, of a particular type. So in some ways, the words encourage us to think of it in a particular kind of way, because we hear those words and we say, it's just a Japanese version of what I already know, just a Japanese pronunciation of what I've already heard before, right? The term that I know I should be critical of, that I know I should be really disturbed by, upset by, because it in fact indexes this abuse. However, my research has put me into contact with so-called Lolicon, with manga anime fans, for a long time. And these people with a Lolita Complex, a Lolicon in their sense of the term, have taught me to sort of check my assumptions and try to hear what they're saying. And in this kind of gamble of not assuming and instead listening, I've come to understand it in a very different way. So, when you look at a lot of the characters that are popular among female fans, it's similar, right? You have younger male characters who are also cute, right? Often beautiful characters, but cute characters as well. So because the manga anime scene in Japan is a kind of youthful scene, you have, within the fiction itself, a lot of the characters are younger, right? So basically you have this kind of youthful character, and even if it's not a youthful character, it looks young because of the cute aesthetic of manga anime. So often, yes, you will see boy characters who are distinctly cute, right? And they are the object of female affection as well. So I do believe that it's not necessarily, or even usually, limited to men, right? You have women who are producing cute girl characters, attracted to cute girl characters, men who are producing and attracted to cute male characters, and so on. So I think, in fact, it is that diversity and flexibility of the identifications that makes it somehow quite distinct. So Saito Tamaki, the psychiatrist, he gave me an example. He said, okay, there's a person who is drawing fiction. This fiction is something they desire. I look at the image. The image is of a caterpillar. The caterpillar has what appears to be a male face. It's a cute, youthful-looking face. That caterpillar then encounters another caterpillar, and the two caterpillars are depicted having sex. What am I to do about this? They appear to be boys. They appear to be young. They're caterpillars. Okay, how do we interpret this? And he says it would be a kind of gross reduction to assume that we knew what this means. Whereas if you have a photograph is of something that actually is there. So if you take a photograph of an underage person in a sexualized context, let alone engaged in sexual conduct activity, you are in fact taking a photograph of something that exists, of an actual crime, of abuse, of a sexualization, objectification of a person. What of the caterpillar? That is not a arbitrary distinction. In fact, that caterpillar and that child are not the same thing. They're qualitatively, fundamentally different things. And so what people like Saito Tamaki encourage us to do is try to understand that the people drawing, consuming, circulating the caterpillar are not the same people who are photographing, circulating, and consuming those photographs. The fact that we weren't extending that same kind of complexity to this material because we were morally outraged by the content, I found to be rather problematic. I'd been talking to artists and fans and producers and so on for a long time, and they didn't tell me that. They told me something very different. They told me about, for example, and this is just one example, but when I draw the image, I become the character. So in that sense, it means something different for the person producing it than it would for the person consuming it, right? The one who sees it without the context of the panels, the story, might read it differently than the one who produces it, identifying with the character, one or the other, both, neither. So there's a kind of complexity and flexibility of identification involved with the production and consumption of these non-representative images. So because of that, there's an openness to the image that I think we need to pay attention to.
No doubt the quality of the novel contributed to the term's future popularity, because for those wondering, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. It was a genuinely good read and I would recommend it. There were film adaptations, Broadway musicals, worldwide notoriety, and the increasing popularity directly positively correlates to the rapidly increasing notoriety of Lolly as a whole, and also cemented it as the official name for the archetype. Even though the novel is far too controversial to be as popular nowadays, the legacy had already done what it needed to do.
And interestingly, Duncan, you're already getting upset at a book that portrays sexual predators in a negative light. Since the book is meant to vilify pedophilia, you and the people who share the anti-Lolicon mindset obviously shouldn't be angry about this. You even went so far as to say that the book should have, quote, never have been written. What's that about? I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that you've only read the premise of the book, if you've even done that much considering your poor explanation. But given how you act when people try to correct you on this topic, not even resorting to ad hominems, I'm not exactly holding my breath.
To end this off, the person who reached out to me on Insta also brought up the YouTuber known as DuncanCantDie, who, like many other antis I've covered, had a terrible, terrible take. And on Discord, when people just wanted to debate with him, he threatened to have the server shut down because he didn't have a single valid argument. The same person who reached out to me also mentioned that he was doxing people that were disagreeing with him. I couldn't find any tangible evidence as of now. I'm still searching as of this video being posted, but with what's been going on recently, I wouldn't put it past him. Granted, the people on this website have pointed it out that he did try to dox somebody, so take that as you will. Granted, this would not surprise me if it was revealed how many people he doxed. From what this person told me on Instagram, it's definitely more than just one person.
Anyway, you can't say that Lolly and Lolita are both related to pedophilia. The meaning of a word can change over time, not to mention there are numerous words that have complete opposite and unrelated meanings to its original use, especially when compared to their modern use. Take the word nice, for example. In the early 1300s, the word nice was actually used as an insult.
Nice.
It's also funny to me how you can do a quick Google search to show Lolita-style dresses, but can't show a single credible source to back up your claim that lolicons are pedos. Wonder why that is.
Look at this child being drawn in a sexualized way.
Now wait just a minute. Didn't you say this earlier?
As far as I'm concerned, especially being from a country where it is illegal and it is considered child porn,
and
when it comes to child pornography, there are two problems with child pornography, right? There is the fact an actual child was abused, and there is the fact that somebody is getting sexual gratification from looking at the child pornography. The fact that somebody is getting sexual gratification from that is abnormal, and it is wrong, right? So yes, when you are talking about Lolicon, you remove one aspect of that, which is an actual child getting hurt. And that is great. But what you also do is allow the normalization of the sexualization of children and childlike characteristics.
So not only do you consider this what you see as a sexualized drawing, CP, but it's also illegal where you live, and you're displaying it on social media to an audience of 96,000.
What? What the fuck?
I swear to God, this guy...
Y'all are fucking weird.
You serious?
Y'all are fucking weird. Yo. Lolicons, y'all are fucking weird, dude. You guys are fucking weird, man.
Weird is not code for morally wrong. Opinions on the Lolicon genre vary. Some people find Lolicon disgusting, others find it weird, others enjoy it. All are valid as long as no one is being hurt or falsely accused of being a pedophile. Most people have a basic, simple understanding of what a pedophile is. A person who is sexually attracted to children. Children, of course, referring to young human beings. In order for an individual to be diagnosed with pedophilic disorder, they must have either had sexual fantasies about children, which again are defined as human beings, have acted on said fantasies, be at least 16 years old, or all of the above. By ignoring this definition and calling every single lolicon a pedophile just because you don't like loli content, it causes more harm than good, as you are creating a cried wolf situation.
You realize this has the same effect as walking into a crowd of people and yelling, "That's the guy that killed my dad," and everybody tackles the guy and kicks his ass, and as he's getting carried off by the police officers, you're like, "Oh, well, he didn't actually kill my dad, but, you know, I think he did, and I feel like he did." You're just passing judgment and crimes onto people that literally haven't committed any crimes.
We are approaching a stage in which, when someone is called a pedophile, people aren't sure whether or not to take the accusation seriously, as the individual being accused may just be into anime girls and not actually preying on real-life human beings. By crying wolf, you are actively drawing attention away from real children that need rescuing. The same could easily be said for reporting Lolicon as CSEM. The reason Lolicon is legal in most countries is because, 1. They understand that it poses no harm, and 2. Because they'd rather spend their money, time, energy, and resources focusing on taking down actual CSEM. Isn't that just common sense? Isn't that where the focus is supposed to be? Taking down the actual crime rather than what you believe to be a probable preemptive cause to said crime? These organizations definitely seem to think so. Disgusting, abhorrent, icky, I don't care what you use to describe your distaste for loli content. But please have some common sense and the basic decency to reserve the word pedophile only for when there's a real child involved. Many victims of CSA and CSEM have spoken out against people who turn their trauma into the sanctimonious smoking gun Lolicon bad.
By comparing fictional content to something as serious as pedophilia, and especially by calling fan art of these characters CEP, fancies are equating real-world abuse to fictional characters who don't exist. It is minimizing and downplaying the seriousness of this real-world crime. They are taking a term that is used to describe the documented abuse of real, living, breathing children, and using it to describe fan art of anime characters. It's extremely insensitive to CSA survivors, many of whom have spoken out about how upsetting it is. And this isn't to diminish the feelings of CSA survivors who are fanties. Their feelings of discomfort toward this kind of not safe for work content is valid, but their actions of harassing are not a proper response to it, and their end goal of seemingly trying to eradicate this fictional content just isn't practical. Rule 34 exists, and there is no stopping people from looting fictional characters, try as they might, because it is the internet, and exposing themselves to this content to complain about it just isn't healthy. They are better off learning how to curate their fandom spaces and focusing on content that brings them joy. Lastly, these words of pedophile and predator shouldn't be thrown around lightly. Being called those terms over something fictional of all things is a very awful feeling. It can be triggering to people, especially to survivors of this kind of abuse, and I wish people were more mindful of that. All that said, there's nothing wrong with being uncomfortable with not safe for work content of these characters. I'm very uncomfortable with not safe for work loli shota content, but I'm not gonna call people who like it pedophiles. You can be uncomfortable by not safe for work content of underage characters, but just mute and block and keep scrolling. I will repeat this a million times if I have to. Discomfort is perfectly fine. The problem with fanties though is that they throw around serious false accusations toward others so easily over fictional characters, and that's very damaging. Fanties aren't simply expressing their personal discomfort about this content, they're policing what fictional content others are allowed to draw or to be attracted to, and that's not okay.
There is an article that I'll link in the description, of course, of somebody who was exposed to Lolicon at a young age. And this does make them a victim because they were exposed to something that they shouldn't have seen until they were older to process darker media. And even then, they know the difference between actual CP and a fucking cartoon. They say correctly that CP needs to involve an actual child being abused in order for it to qualify as such, and that CP is harmful and illegal no matter where you go, which is also right. And here's what they have to say about people caring more about drawings. My childhood trauma is not your moral platform. My childhood trauma is not your sword. My childhood trauma is not something you can blindly use to bludgeon random people who look like there could be a pedophile. Because in doing this, you are objectifying my abuse in a different but similar way to how a pedophile would. Rather than getting off to it sexually, you're getting off to it emotionally. Because in this state of mind, you think you're fighting for survivors like me, assuming you're even thinking about survivors like me. You're not. You're not doing a thing to people who abuse people like me.
You can claim you care about real kids all you want, but you don't. You only care about yourself in a twisted need to look and feel morally superior to others.
You're nonces. You're all nonces. Every single one of you is a nonce. Every single one. You're all nonces. Get over it. Like, go get help. Get therapy.
Get help and get therapy. Okay, what if mental health professionals agree with Lolicons? Oh, wait a minute, they do! They say there's no correlation between Lolicon and pedophilia. Now, who are you gonna believe? Some random-ass YouTuber? Or mental health professionals with decades of experience?
Let's start with the people against Lolicon stuff here, alright? What are their arguments? Well, obviously, they say it's a depiction of a minor, and anything that's sexualized of a minor could lead to further display of it upon real people. So in order to prevent that, they want to get rid of it. They view it as sick and disturbing, pretty much. However, in a court case called Free Speech Coalition vs. Reno, the connection between the drawings and the real crime, they basically said there's no real connection yet. They ruled that there's nothing. You can't connect one and the other. Which, my opinion, is pretty true. Because for a lot of you, you guys all know about the arguments of video game violence, right? I mean, we've all played just gruesome, horrific, violent games. And has that made any of us just want to go murder somebody or do something completely outlandish? No. Let me tell you, I'm a pretty safe man, even though I've played a lot of Grand Theft Auto. The last thing I want to do is get a hooker in a car and then bang her to get my health up even more and then kill her afterward to get my money back. You know, I'm not into that. And that's pretty much what the argument is against Lolicon stuff. It's too similar to real life, and therefore it should be illegal because it's sick and disturbing. And the fact that it could incite abuse or whatever kind of thing from another person, and they don't want that to happen. But yes, I just explained the counter argument against that, and that is the fact that there is no real relationship. I mean, video game violence has been debated half to death, and we know that there is exactly no correlation between someone shooting someone in a video game versus someone in real life. That stuff just doesn't happen because of video games, no matter how much the media wants to twist it. And another thing I want to bring up is the fact that drawings are not real people. I know! And thus the argument comes, it is a victimless crime, because, you know, it's just a drawing. I mean, we see plenty of horrible things happen to cartoon or anime characters, whatever you want to call them. People getting decapitated, getting melted into gore blood, having their bones mashed into little bits, just absolutely horrific and terrible things. However, for some reason, you don't see any other public outcry for this kind of stuff. So I find it kind of humorous how something as inhuman as murdering somebody is viewed as okay, whilst, you know, doing some off-brand stuff is viewed more as inhumane. I don't understand. Basically, my point here is, if they want to ban everything, like, if they want to view these cartoon characters as real people, then they're going to need to pass laws for all the bad stuff that happens to cartoon characters, including the murder and violence. Are they gonna start prosecuting people for having their favorite characters killed off in an anime now? Like, what's going on? And here's the thing. Like, this kind of stuff is not just specific to anime. It's how many American shows, how many novels have you read where bad things happen to not only adults, but children as well? There's plenty of best-selling novels out there that have things happen to children. May I say Game of Thrones? Yet for some reason, that one gets praised. There are even laws stating that if the anime characters have small breasts, they could be considered lolly and under the age, and you could get sentenced to jail time because of it. Just because they have small babbies. That's just ridiculous, man. Now, if you don't know, real girls, while there are some with huge boobs, there's lots of them that don't have huge boobs. What if you just want a normal-looking girl, huh? Just because the girl doesn't have huge knockers doesn't mean you're having happy fluffy time with a minor. Come on now.
What is sexually attractive about this person? Like, what feature is sexually attractive about this?
Not everyone likes lollies in a sexual way. Some of them just like it for the cute factor. Though in this case, a more accurate term would be moe.
So when we're talking about moe, I think what we're talking about is specifically an effective response to fictional characters. And there's a lot of parts of that that are important, but I'm just going to focus on a few. So it's an effective response, so someone's responding. What are they responding to? Or they're responding to something. It can be a lot of different things, but it tends to be a manga anime character, right? So it could be a manga anime character in a game, or it could be a manga anime character in a light novel, or it could be a manga anime character as a figurine, or it could be the voice of that manga anime character. But in the world in which, in the sort of field in which I'm interacting with people, they tend to reserve that term for this kind of response they have to characters. So affect meaning just simply a kind of response, a bodily sort of response. You're sort of being moved by this encounter with another body. So that body that we're talking about is a fictional character, is the kind of theoretical frame I'm working with. So for them, it could be a lot of different things, right? So what their character type is might be very different from what another person's character type is. The term moe, I think, is important because it allows us to talk about a relationship with the fictional character, specifically as a fictional character that has its own sort of ability or capacity to move us. And I think because of that, it really allows us to talk about things in a new and interesting way, really. It opens up a lot of different things. So growing up, in the 1980s and so on, Disney was always around, right? So people talked about Disney characters and how much you love this character and what have you. But there really wasn't an awful lot of talk about the specific relationship with that character and how it moved us. So moephobia is a term developed by Ito Go. Ito Go describes it this way. So people don't understand certain things. To put it in the most general terms, people don't understand certain things, and those things then offend them. They think, what's going on there? I don't understand that. That's weird. So for him, a lot of times people will respond to manga anime fans as this kind of weird group, especially moe fans, right? He notices, because he says, isn't it interesting that at the time when manga anime are becoming so mainstream, right? One Piece is being read by how many people? Millions, right? Around the world, too. So we have these massive franchises. We have these mainstream killer successes, like Your Name last year was a monster hit. So there's ways in which anime and manga are becoming more and more mainstream. And so fans of those media are less and less strange or weird. And so because of that, he's kind of trying to think about what is it that people are so scared of? And he uses the term moephobia. I think less than people being afraid of the identity, the otaku identity, and this kind of, weird relationship with characters, I think it's even more fundamental than that. I think the idea that people are open to the image, right? They're open to that character, and they're being affected by it, they're being moved by it. I think this can be terrifying for people because they don't understand what's going on there. Why is that person so excited about this, right? What's going on, right? And I think that kind of openness to the image, the image that moves you, let's call it the moving image. So being open to the moving image can in many ways open you to a lot of criticism, I think. So people will look at you and they'll look at the fan who's responding and say, it seems kind of out of control, seems wild. I think that is a little bit more fundamental, because then what you end up with is you end up with comparisons, not across identities, but across groups of people in relationship to media. And so I think about it that way, about the ways in which particular populations might be imagined as a group that's more likely to be moved by media to violence or crime or some sort of ill, social ill, then becomes the reason why we talk about that group in certain ways. Isn't it strange that these people are, so excited by these characters, who actually treat them like idols, right? Who are oriented towards them, who take them as sex objects, as sex symbols. Wow, they don't have interest in the real thing. They've chosen the two-dimensional. They have a two-dimensional complex, the discourse said. You know what? These guys with the two-dimensional complex, they're weird enough that we need to sort of separate them out from the rest of us. They'll be the otaku. So that was the beginning of that discourse. That was the first time the term was used as a negative label. So it was manga anime fans calling other manga anime fans weirdos. And what was weird about them was they were attracted to, oriented towards, open to the effect of fictional characters, manga anime characters. So for example, in the late 70s, early 80s, Lolicon was in many ways almost synonymous with two-dimensional complex. So if you were attracted to, oriented towards the manga anime character, and if that was considered to be pathological, they would say, okay, that person has a two-dimensional complex, that person is a Lolicon, that person is an otaku, right? So it was very central to that original sort of debate about the orientation of desire towards fiction. And so what Moe did, to return to that, what's fascinating about Moe is it once again insists on the fictional character, right? So the people who are responding this way are saying it's the fictional character that I'm responding to, not as a replacement or as a, in some way a stand-in for something more real. No, it's the character that I'm responding to. So that kind of insistence on the relationship with the character makes crystal clear what was already clear, that there's a distinction between three-dimensional and two-dimensional in this kind of fan community. And that sort of got muddled along the way by a lot of negative publicity and press. And I think what happens in a lot of the reporting today is people sort of will focus on one or not the other, or they'll confuse the two for one another. They'll sort of weave them together. And this, I think, makes it very, very difficult to, again, have a productive discussion. The majority of manga anime fans do not seem confused about this. They've developed literacies. They know when they're watching cartoons. They've grown up with cartoons. They'll tell you everything you want to know about cartoons. And if you insist that there's no difference between fiction and reality, they'll carefully and slowly tell you, if you hear them, that you're confused. They're not confused. You're confused. I think that's actually an interesting debate to have, right? So what I tried to do with for example, the Moe Manifesto was just listen, right? So hear their words, translate their words, and put it out there. So now we can actually say, maybe we're not hearing what they're saying. Maybe we need to rethink what we thought was common sense, what we think is so clearly a problem. And this might in fact allow us to then ask questions that would make more sense to the manga anime fans instead of sort of judging them without ever bothering to engage them in conversation.
I'll use a lolly that I really like as an example. Kana from Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. When we first meet her, she's immediately distrustful of Kobayashi, and humans in general, despite the former having no malicious intent towards her. She even offers Kana a place to stay, despite all the accusations being thrown at her, which results in Kobayashi becoming the best mom. Throughout the season, we watched Kana grow as a character, go to school while making new friends, her and Kobayashi forming a mother-daughter relationship, and just being cute overall. I guarantee you, if you were to ask any Dragon Maid fan what makes Kana so great in that show, many of them will list the reasons I just mentioned. What I mentioned about people liking Kana can also extend to many other characters, such as Lulu, Uzaki-chan, and Jay. People who are against Lolicon will often obsess over a character's age and completely overlook the fact that the age is just as fictional as the character they're talking about. Duncan is no exception. Believe me when I say you are seriously not helping your case here. To summarize this point, you simply can't assume whether or not someone is attracted to a fictional character just for their appearance, personality, or both, unless you ask.
We'll put down Lolicon together.
Well then, I hope you enjoy wasting your time. It's not gonna go anywhere anytime soon.
So yes, the basic foundation of this hoopla is you like fictional teenager, you like real life teenager. In the process of constructing this rather stretchful argument, they missed one very crucial point. These characters are fictional. There's no denying the fact that these are fictional characters in a universe that do not exist within our reality because they are constructed by the minds of the creator of those fictional universe. Some of them wrote it when they're high. So explain to us how showing affection towards a fictional character would contribute into the affection of real-life human beings. Explain to us how the actions that we perform in a fictional context contribute into the real-life suffering of others, especially the suffering of real-life minors. Now, I am practically invoking the video game violence argument, except the video game violence is being replaced with suggestive or explicit works involving fictional characters who are not of age, but even that one has its own counter-argument. This argument is invalid because violent urges are not the same as reproductive urges, and I agree to some extent. It is true that our reproductive desires are pretty strong, and probably even more so than our violent desires. We wouldn't have all of those Hollywood scandals if it weren't for doofuses abusing their power and unable to control their urges. But just because they're different urges doesn't mean that they are uncontrollable urges. Just because some doofuses are unable to control their reproductive urges doesn't mean that we couldn't. If we cannot control our reproductive urges, we will be engaging ourselves in many sorts of reproductive activities every day, especially the non-consensual, illegal, and incredibly damaging ones towards the unwilling partner. We do not live in a culture where people are enacting reproductive activities to random strangers without their approval, or at least I don't believe it. Maybe if you're part of the progressive sphere who are being made paranoid by exaggerated statistics, but on average, guys just don't lose control and immediately attempt to hump on a nearby stranger. The average guys don't exactly have the same amount of power and influence as the 1% of the world, and can't really abuse the power to get away with aggressively cuddling people without their consent. Fortunately, not a lot of people can find a good team on this multiplayer session, and fortunately we are blessed with the knowledge that pretty much all of us are capable of satisfying our reproductive urges through the means of single-player campaigns with a certain media assistant, some of which might include the aforementioned works that these moral police are threatening to censor. God forbid that people decide to unwind their reproductive urges in a healthy and harmless fashion. And fortunately, since this is a single-player campaign, no one is really harmed in the process, and you can even cheat your way through it without any sorts of guilt. That is, unless if we're talking about a media assistant where real children are involved, in which case we will force kick you into a multiplayer session where the FBI is in your opposing team and no one is willing to join yours. Point is, let people play single player in peace. Let people use their media assistant that involves these fictional characters. You should only be really worried for people who are genuinely trying to engage themselves with multiplayer sessions with real people and real minors. If those people exist within your fandom or your community, then it is definitely a cause of concern. But works that merely feature the aforementioned fictional characters should not be your concern. In fact, you should be glad that those exist because they would provide a great assistant for those who are playing the campaign. Be glad that there's a way for people to relieve their reproductive urges through this safe and harmless mean, in the same manner that video games do for our own violent or other urges. However, none of these arguments are enough to convince these moral police because it doesn't matter. And they're right, it doesn't matter. To their eyes, it doesn't. What matters is you people deleting their works and scrubbing them off of the internet's existence. What matters is you conforming to what they want, because that's all what this is about. It's about you giving them control over the things that you are doing. It's about them telling you that they have the power over you and you don't. Now, here's the thing. If you feel genuinely uncomfortable with these works, that is perfectly fine. You are entitled to feel uncomfortable. You are entitled to say that this fan art or fan fiction or fan work in general gross you out. You are not, however, entitled to brigade or encourage people to delete those artworks based on how it insulted your personal comfort. You are not entitled to encourage censorship simply because you feel mentally violated by witnessing or reading or listening to those things. At that point, you might as well try to censor the entire internet. Censorship will never ever work for your favor. You cut off one of these things, hundreds if not millions more will spawn. That's That's just the rule, the 34th rule if you will. Unfortunately, you will never understand that because encouraging censorship against these works is one of the ways for you to feel like you've done something amazing to this world. Encouraging censorship towards artworks that you deem morally horrendous, even though they merely violated your own personal comfort, makes you feel like you stand up towards something. It makes you feel like you're an amazing person who is fighting against all the evil in the world. Sad to say this, but you're not. You're not a prophet, you're not a saint, you're a human being who can make mistakes, and this is one of them.
In summary, Duncan Can't Die will obsess over a fictional character's age, says a book vilifying pedophilia shouldn't exist, displays what he calls CP on screen in front of thousands for all to see, is unable to tell the difference between childlike and children, calls grown woman pedobait. Is this guy serious? All of this with the mentality that anyone who tries to correct him or even slightly disagrees with him is the enemy. With all this context in mind, this sure says a lot about him, especially when you add up everything else we've gone over.
In conclusion, if Duncan can accuse people he doesn't know of being pedophiles, we can accuse him of suffering from confirmation bias. His only goal is to look good and make himself feel good, not educate or guide anyone towards accurate information.
Oh, hey Duncan, if you happen to be watching this, I have a challenge for you. You're probably not gonna like it, but I don't care. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, or for those who are unaware, this is Martin Lorax, main character of The Human Centipede 2. After years of psychological, mental, and sexual abuse from his parents, he becomes obsessed with the human centipede. To achieve his dream of creating his own human centipede, he obtains volunteers by knocking them out and taking them back to his warehouse. Martin begins assembling his naked victims in the order that he wants in the centipede. Ashlyn, Candy, Rachel, Carrie, Paul, Ian, Dick, Greg, Tim, Alan, Valerie, Kim. He starts his operation by smashing out the teeth of Dick, followed by the rest of the dozen, sans Rachel, who Martin, under the belief that she's dead, placed her under a tarp alongside the deceased Jake. Martin proceeded by severing the knee ligaments of his victims. After accidentally killing Alan after slicing into his buttocks, big yikes, a troubled Martin ditches any attempt at a surgical operation and instead stapled each person to each other's buttocks. The end result is a 10-person centipede, with the deceased Rachel, Jake, and Alan placed in the corner under a tarp. Happy with his completion, Martin then proceeds to inject laxatives into all 10 victims, forcing them to violently evacuate their bowels into the mouth of the person behind them. Sexually aroused at the woman at the end of the chain, he approaches her, wraps his genitalia in barbed wire, then proceeds to rape her. Yes, this happens in the movie. My God. Oh, what's that, Duncan? You're disturbed? Grossed out? Then head to Twitter and spread the hashtag Tom6IsOverParty or hashtag Tom6IsCancelled, because that's exactly the type of mindset people like you have when it comes to media you don't like. Rant and rave over it just to fuel your own ego. The reason I myself have this character as my profile picture is because, 1. The actor is massively underrated. Say what you will about the film itself, but this guy's clearly got talent. He's the one thing that keeps this film afloat. He really sells the "I'm about to screw you up big time but I've been through a lot" character, even in this one image. Number 2, when antis say that, quote, fiction affects reality, unquote, the first person that comes to mind, for me anyway, is Martin, because his mindset is the embodiment of what antis think pro-shippers are like. They think that pro-shippers will see something they know is abhorrent, get sexually aroused by it, then for some reason want to create the same thing in the real world. Sounds ridiculous out loud, doesn't it? I have him as my profile picture just to poke fun at the anti-mindset. This is what they see when they look at us. This is how they believe we all think, and this is how they convince themselves that anyone standing outside of their ideological bubble seek to treat them.
We'll also introduce you to the absolute masterpiece titled A Serbian Film. Incest, pedophilia, necrophilia. Oh yeah, you're in for a real treat. Watch these films, then talk to us about fiction weirding you out.
It's fake. Just special effects. No one's being hurt. So you admit fiction is just fiction then? Good. Glad we can agree. Now stop whining about Lolicon.
Stop whining. You lack discipline.
It's meant to be disturbing, not arousing. Ever heard of Rule 34, Duncan? Anything can be arousing. Scat, vomit, farting, all of these are real kinks people have. And these same people can separate their fantasies from reality just as lolicons can. Besides, the intent of the media doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's still fictional content that didn't hurt anyone in the making of it, nor does it hurt anyone by consuming it. And before you use cuties as some sort of gotcha moment, remember that kids were actually being exploited in the making of this film, so you can't say that no one was being hurt. Oh, but I didn't know about this film. Well, now you do. Now apply the same standard that you hold with Lolicon, and get to the cancelling. Otherwise, I don't want to hear any more complaints about Lolicon if you're not going to do that.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because there's more videos to come.
It's the same old fucking shit! God damn!